Hello, welcome to EduBlush. I'm Vincent, your presenter for Life Science 3. We're going to look at homeostasis and the feedback mechanism associated with that. So, first of all, what is homeostasis? Homeostasis refers to the ability of the body to maintain a constant internal environment irrespective of the changes in the external environment for proper tissue functioning. So, the internal environment of human and the condition on which they depend on, we look at the tissue fluid, which is the internal environment of the multicellular organism. Cells are normally surrounded by this fluid, and this tissue fluid is also called the interstitial fluid. The fluid is made up of many solutes in them. These solutes are substances that are dissolved in water. Some of these solutes are salts, sugar, hormones, amino acid, etc. So the composition of the tissue fluid is affected by many factors. 1, the pH. 2, the water concentration. 3, oxygen carbon dioxide content. 4, the temperature and the glucose. So these are the factors that must be kept constant, okay, for proper tissue functioning. Now the composition of the tissue fluid needs to be kept constant in order to maintain the correct functioning of the cells. Therefore, the factor mentioned like pH, carbon dioxide, oxygen, water, salt, glucose must be kept constant. So, what has to happen? When we talk about this factor being controlled, it is not possible for them to be the same all the time. Therefore, we say that they must be kept constant within a narrow limit. That's why I say relatively constant. Okay? The level of glucose, gases, and water within the blood must be kept constant within that narrow limit. This is done by what we call negative feedback mechanism. We saw negative feedback mechanism when we're doing endocrine system. Okay, and we see the negative feedback mechanism can also be achieved through the nervous system, because remember we said they are coordinated system. In this case, any change or imbalance is sent back to the nervous system, and the nervous system then responds by sending the impulses to bring about a negative response. In this way, the balance is corrected. Now let us look at maintaining the glucose level. The glucose level in the blood is maintained normally by two hormones, insulin and glucagon, produced by islet cells in the pancreas. Those islets of Langerhans, they are specialized cells. The alpha cells, we said, produce glucagon, and the beta cells produce insulin. So, when is insulin produced? When the level of blood sugar level is high, so that is a change. When there's a change, the information is now sent to the islet of Langerhans in the pancreas. The islet secretes the hormone insulin, then insulin then reduces the blood glucose level. So how does the insulin do that? 1, it allows the glucose to be absorbed into the cells. It is then used by the cells for cellular respiration. Secondly, it causes the cell of the liver and muscle to convert the excess glucose to glycogen and store it. Therefore, the level of blood glucose will lower back to normal. Okay? So the high level of glucose in the blood is the high glucose or level of glucose in the blood is referred to the pancreas, which in turn now secretes insulin, which then lowers the blood glucose. You see, that's negative feedback. High level of glucose in the blood, target organ, pancreas. The pancreas secretes insulin. Insulin lower blood glucose level to normal. Now, when blood glucose level now is too low, then now the islet of Langerhans in the pancreas secrete the hormone glucagon. So low glucose, glue comes in to make glucose. So glucagon comes in to make. So the glucagon then increases the blood glucose level back to normal by doing what? One, it causes the glycogen that is stored in the liver and muscle to be converted back to glucose. In this way, the glucose level increases back to normal. Okay, so what was the change? Low glucose level. And what is the target organ? The pancreas. What does it do? It secretes glucagon. What does glucagon do? Increase the blood glucose level to normal. Now we look at the next homeostatic control, which is oxygen and carbon dioxide. So when you are exercising, physical activity is very high, so the body will need more energy. Therefore, cellular respiration is increased to provide this more energy. So this increased cellular respiration releases too much of carbon dioxide in the body. So carbon dioxide increase during activity as a result of increased cellular respiration. So this means that the level of carbon dioxide have now increased. And if the level of carbon dioxide becomes too high, it can affect the body pH of the tissue. Therefore, the level of carbon dioxide must be kept within the narrow limit. This is done by negative feedback mechanism. So when this carbon dioxide increases, then you have specialized receptors at the carotid artery and in the medulla oblongata are stimulated. Okay, the receptor at the carotid artery, they send impulses to the medulla oblongata. The medulla oblongata becomes stimulated and then send impulses to the heart and breathing muscles. That's the diaphragm and the intercostal muscles. This causes the heart to beat faster. Therefore, blood-rich in carbon dioxide is carried at a faster rate from the lungs, is carried at a faster rate to the lungs from the heart. So you must remember that the breathing muscles are also responsible for breathing movement. So those breathing muscles, they will contract and relax faster. So to speed up inhalation and exhalation, this movement are increased when the abdominal muscle push the diaphragm with more force. So carbon dioxide is exhaled faster. This means the carbon dioxide level is lowered. So when the level of carbon dioxide increases, the medulla oblongata respond by doing what? Increasing the breathing movement and the heart rate, and therefore causing carbon dioxide to leave the body at a faster rate. So you see that this is an example of negative feedback mechanism. Therefore, the normal level of carbon dioxide is lower to normal. So in this case, the nervous system is responsible for marinating the carbon dioxide level by using negative feedback mechanism. So you have to regulate the carbon dioxide level by feedback mechanism. So we look at osmoregulation. Remember that osmoregulation refers to water balance from osmosis. So in human body, osmoregulation is brought by using the nephrons of the kidney. So you see that when the level of water in the blood is too high, then specialized receptor called osmoreceptors become stimulated. These receptors are found at the hypothalamus. We remember we said one of the functions of hypothalamus is for test, if you're thirsty. So the hypothalamus have these receptors, then the hypothalamus will send a message to the pituitary gland, which reduces the secretion of ADH. So when the ADH secretion is being reduced, then the permeability of the renal tubules also will be reduced. Therefore, more water will remain in the kidney tubules to be sent out as urine. Okay? And less water is reabsorbed back. In this way, the water level will lower until it goes back to normal. But when the water level is too high, the osmoreceptor of the hypothalamus are stimulated. So the hypothalamus now sends signal messages to the pituitary gland. The pituitary gland now secretes more ADH. When more ADH is secreted, what happens? The permeability of the kidney tubules, or the renal tubules increases. So when this permeability increases, more water is reabsorbed from the kidney tubules into the kidney medulla, where it is reabsorbed back into the bloodstream. So in this way, more water is reabsorbed back into the blood and less water is sent out as urine. So you send out a small quantity of concentrated urine, like when you're doing sports. So we look at the maintenance of salt. This is very important. You have to know this. Very, very important. Very, very important. Take note of this. So when there is too little sodium in the body, more aldosterone is secreted by the adrenal gland. Aldosterone by the adrenal gland. So this ensures that more sodium is reabsorbed from the distal and collecting tubules. So the sodium is reabsorbed by the blood capillaries. Therefore, less sodium will leave the body within the urine. This ensures that the amount of sodium is raised to normal. So when there's too much sodium in the body, less aldosterone is secreted by the adrenal gland. Therefore, less sodium reabsorbed from the distal and collecting tubule. This means that more sodium leaves the body with the urine. Therefore, the amount of sodium decreases back to normal. So you have to know that these mechanisms are example of feedback mechanism. So any change in the level of sodium is referred back to the adrenal gland as a feedback, which then increase or decrease the level of aldosterone, which in turn return the sodium back to normal by doing the opposite, the negative of it. That's why I call it negative feedback. Aldosterone also helps to maintain water level in the body in the following way. So an increase in aldosterone level means that more sodium is retained. So therefore, the concentration of the blood increases because of more sodium in it. So this in turn lead to more water leaving the tubules and entering the capillaries, the blood capillaries, because there's high sodium in it, so there's higher concentration. So water normally move from its region of high concentration to its region of lower concentration because there's sodium higher on the other side. So the more water molecule move into the capillaries. So a decrease in the level of aldosterone means that less sodium is reabsorbed. Therefore, the concentration of the blood is decreased. This means that water will leave the capillaries into the tubules out as urine. Now we look at temperature regulation. Your body regulates temperature. You see that humans are endothermic, which means they regulate their body temperature does not depend on the environment. Not unlike lizards that are ectotherm, okay, or poikilotherm. The humans are endothermic. This means that they are able to maintain a constant body temperature irrespective of the temperature of the environment. So temperature regulation is the ability of an organism to keep its body temperature within certain limit, even when the external temperature changes. So you see that if your system cannot, at times your system have to react, like now during the coronavirus, if you have the infection, you see that the body temperature start rising. That is normally associated with viral or bacterial infection. The body is trying to react to create the environment not conducive for that bacteria. So they have to check your temperature, because normally if you are okay, then your body temperature have to be regulated. Okay. So for us to do that, we have to look at the skin, because it's responsible for that. So if you look at this diagram of the skin here, the structure we are going to focus on when it comes to temperature regulation, we are going to look at the sweat gland and the blood vessels there. Okay. But now let's look at the skin in general. It has two layers. There is the epidermis and the inner dermis. So the epidermis is made up of 4 layers. You have 1, 2, 3, 4. The epidermis, and they have the inner dermis. So this 4 layer, the horny layer is made up of flattened or dead cells, the one that you see normally peel off. Then you also have the protein keratin that is being deposited in this layer, that is responsible for the texture of your skin and also for your hair Then you have the non-granular layer, which is called the clear layer. Then you have the granular layer, and the last layer, the germinative layer, which is made up of active dividing cuboidal cells. This cell replaces the cell loss from the horny layer. And skin peel off, that cells replaces it. So it contains the pigment that gives the color of the skin, which that pigment is called the melanin. Now we go now to the dermis, the inner layer. This layer is made up of dense connective tissues. It also contains blood vessels, lymph vessels, receptors for both senses and the nerves. Then you have the subcutaneous gland inside, the subcutaneous gland that, the sebaceous gland that help to provide oil on your skin. Okay, the sebaceous gland, it produces an oily substance that we call sebum. Okay, then we have the sweat gland and the sweat duct. You have these hair follicles. You have hair erector muscles there. These are hair follicles. You have hair erector muscles that help to control the state of the hair. At times, the hair can lie flat on the body when places are hot, or the hair becomes erect when places are cold. So it is interesting to know that the hair and the sweat glands are epidermal structure, but they project into the dermis. So you see them outside, but they went right down into the dermis. So how is the skin adapted for thermoregulation? Take note of this. One, there are many different sense organs that enable it to pick up various stimuli. For example, there are Methenian corpuscles that are able to pick up the stimuli of touch. The stimuli of pressure is picked up by the Pacinian corpuscle, and that of heat by the Ruffinian corpuscle. There are also free nerve endings that are sensitive to pain, hot, and cold. So the wall of, secondly, how it's adapted, the wall of the blood vessels are made up of smooth muscles, and these muscles ensure that the blood vessels can either widen, dilate, or narrow Okay, now let's continue on the power interruption. So we said that the blood vessels dilate or constrict. This means that if the temperature is high, then the blood vessels will dilate and allowing heat to escape, or if the temperature is low, then the blood vessel will constrict to prevent heat from escape. Thirdly, it has sweat gland. So the sweat gland, the sweat is carried by sweat duct to the surface of the skin. So as this sweat evaporates, it will allow the body to cool down, because as it evaporates, it takes the heat, body temperature, use the heat on the body to evaporate. Water needs heat to evaporate. So as it evaporates, use the heat on the body to evaporate. So this gives a cooling effect on the body. So we look at the role of the skin. So when the body temperature increases, so the thermostat shot, you see, body temperature increases, then homeostasis have to take place, increases. What will happen? Increase in the body temperature, you have to lower the body temperature. So how does it lower the body temperature? First, the blood vessels of the skin, they have to dilate so that more blood will flow to the surface of the skin for heat loss to be increased by conduction, convection, and radiation. So the sweat gland become more active and produces more sweat, so that as the sweat evaporates, it gives a cooling effect on the body. Okay. So one, when co-receptors in the body will pick up a drop in the temperature, like for example, when the body temperature drop, then this stimulus is converted into impulses. The impulses are sent to the thermoregulatory center of the brain, which is the hypothalamus. Then the hypothalamus is also stimulated by the low blood temperature. The hypothalamus sends nerve impulses to the muscles of the blood vessels. Then these blood vessels now they'll constrict because you are cold. You see that why when the weather is cold, you see a light-skinned person will appear pale, because the blood vessels skin they are constricted. So less blood flows to the surface of the skin. This is what we call vasoconstriction. So less blood flows to the surface of the skin. In this way, the heat loss to the environment is reduced. So less blood is sent to the sweat gland also. This means that less sweat is produced. Therefore, no cooling will occur during the evaporation of the sweat. Okay, so less sweat is produced. So that will make sure that the body temperature will rise back to normal. So on a hot day, what happened on a hot day? The heat receptor of the skin are stimulated. The receptor pick up the stimulus of the heat and convert it into nerve impulses. These nerve impulses are carried to the thermoregulatory center of the brain, which is the hypothalamus, and it's also stimulated by the higher blood temperature, like when you are doing sport, you are running. So the hypothalamus responding by sending nerve impulses to the muscles of the blood vessel of the skin. This causes the blood vessel of the skin to dilate. That's why you see when a light-skinned person is doing sports, you see the skin are also red because it dilates for more blood to flow to the surface of the skin. Therefore, heat escape from the blood by radiation. The sweat glands secrete more sweat. Evaporation of the sweat causes the skin to cool down. Therefore, the body temperature reduces to normal. So, sometimes this hemostatic control does not work. This leads to what we call hyperthermia or hypothermia. Hypo, low. This occurs when the body temperature becomes less than 37 for a long period of time. So during hypothermia, the body loses more heat than it can produce. So like they put you in the fridge. So it usually occurs by exposure to extreme cold weather for a long time. Refer to the condition when the body temperature increases, that's hyperthermia now, above 37 for a long period of time. This is usually caused by prolonged exposure to high temperature. So in this case, the body absorbs a lot more heat than it can lose. Okay. So we've seen some terminology like homeostasis, the ability of the body to maintain a relatively constant internal environment irrespective of the changes in the external environment for proper tissue functioning. We also look at the tissue fluid that refer to the fluid that bathe or surround the cells of the multicellular organism. We look at osmoregulation, which is the process of maintaining the water balance within our organism. We look at osmoreceptors, that specialized receptors that are able to pick up changes in water level of the body. Thermoregulation is the ability of an organism to keep its body temperature constant within certain limit, even when the external temperature is different. Endothermic refer to organisms that are able to maintain a constant body temperature irrespective of the temperature change in the environment. Vasoconstriction refers to narrowing of the blood vessels as a result of the environment being too cold, or vasodilation refers to the widening of the blood vessel as a result of the environment being very hot. Okay, thank you. For more question and further exam type question, I advise you, please, when viewing this video on YouTube, you click on subscribe. It's free subscription for you to have access to much more exam question on the EduBlush platform. And when you are having paid subscription, they have again much more for a distinction layer. But having access to EduBlush, know that you're guaranteed to pass your license exam. Have a wonderful day. Thank you. Have a nice day.